Somewhere beneath the streets of Tokyo, the ground is moving. Not in a way you can feel. Not yet. But deep below the concrete and steel, below the subway tunnels and the fiber optic cables and the 37 million lives stacked on top of each other, the Pacific Plate is grinding westward at roughly 9 centimeters per year. Slow, relentless, inevitable. Scientists call what's coming the Nankai Trough earthquake. They've been warning about it for decades. A magnitude 9.0 or higher. A rupture so large it could shake central Japan for 3 to 5 minutes straight. 3 to 5 minutes of the Earth trying to tear itself apart. They believe it could kill 300,000 people. It could wipe out $3 trillion in economic activity. It could change the shape of Japan's coastline permanently. And the terrifying part? They don't know when. It could be tomorrow. It could be in 50 years. But they're almost certain it is coming.
I'm standing right now in the heart of Shinjuku, one of the most densely packed urban districts on the planet. And what strikes you immediately, and before you even start thinking about earthquake spits, is the sheer scale of what's been built here. Skyscrapers stretching 250 meters into the sky, bridges arching over 8-lane highways, subway lines running every 90 seconds. And all of it, every single beam, every foundation, every bolt, has been engineered with one terrifying mind.
Japan sits at one of the most geologically violent addresses on Earth. The country occupies the intersection of 4 major tectonic plates: the Pacific Plate, the Philippine Sea Plate, the Eurasian Plate, and the North American Plate. From massive slabs of the Earth's crust, all colliding, all subducting, all releasing catastrophic energy directly beneath one of the most populated nations in the world. The numbers are almost incomprehensible. Japan experiences roughly 1,500 earthquakes per year that are large enough to be felt. That's 4 a day. On a normal day in Japan, the ground shakes. But it wasn't always taken seriously. Not the way it is now. In September 1923, a magnitude 7.9 earthquake struck just south of Tokyo. The Great Kanto earthquake. It wasn't just the shaking that killed people. It was the fire. Thousands of wood and paper homes had just been cooking lunch when the quake hit. Charcoal braziers scattered across the rubble. And then Tokyo burned. For 2 days, the death toll reached 142,000 people. An entire city, one of the most important in the world, reduced to ash and ruin in 48 hours.
There's a monument not far from here to the victims of 1923. And when you read the accounts, the eyewitness testimonies from people who survived that fire tomb, it sounds almost medieval. People jumping into rivers to escape the flames. Entire neighborhoods consumed in minutes. The city of Tokyo essentially erased. And the thing that stays with you is that the population of Tokyo in 1923 was about 3.7 million people.
The Kanto earthquake rewired how Japan thought about buildings. For the first time, engineers began asking a question that seemed almost philosophical. How do you build something that can survive the Earth itself turning violent? The initial answer was simple: stronger. Make buildings stronger. Use more concrete, more steel, more rigidity. The logic made sense. If the ground shakes, a strong building stands firm. But then the real problem appeared. A building that is too rigid doesn't survive an earthquake. It fights it. And when you fight a force that can move millions of tons of earth, you lose. Engineers began to discover that strength alone wasn't the answer. The skyscrapers of the early 20th century would crack, shear at their foundations, and collapse precisely because they refused to move. The ground wanted to move, and the building wouldn't follow. That realization would take decades to fully understand. And in the meantime, Japan kept shaking.
I'm inside what engineers call a seismic simulation laboratory on the outskirts of Tokyo.
It looks at first glance like an enormous empty warehouse. Steel walls, high ceilings, industrial lighting.
But the floor is the extraordinary part. It's a massive hydraulic platform, roughly 20 meters square. They can shake this platform at the exact frequency, the exact amplitude, and watch in real time what happens to whatever building model is placed on top of it. And the engineers here can program it to simulate any earthquake ever recorded. Any one. The 1995 Kobe earthquake.
January 17th, 1995, 5:46 in the morning. Kobe, Japan. A 6.9 magnitude earthquake struck the city with almost no warning. In 15 seconds, 6,400 people were dead. Entire neighborhoods collapsed. Elevated highways folded sideways. The Hanshin Expressway, a 6-lane elevated roadway, toppled over and landed on its side, still almost intact, like a sleeping giant. Buildings that had been designed to survive earthquakes simply didn't. And this is where things became terrifying. Many of those buildings have been built to the old code. The pre-1981 code, which demanded rigidity. They stood straight and proud until the ground moved, and then they shattered. But buildings built after 1981, under Japan's new seismic code, performed dramatically better. They flexed, they swayed, they moved with the earthquake instead of fighting it. Kobe became a case study that every engineer in the world studied. But for Japan, it was something deeper. It was a national trauma, a reminder that the big one was never hypothetical.
What you have to understand about the Japanese relationship with earthquakes is that it isn't fear exactly. It's more like a permanent, low-grade awareness. Every child in Japan runs earthquake drills in school. Every office building has emergency kits. Every train platform has announcements about evacuation routes. Earthquake preparedness isn't something people do for a natural disaster checklist. It's woven into daily life the way carrying an umbrella is in London. You don't think about it consciously, but it's always there.
After Kobe, Japan embarked on one of the most ambitious engineering programs in human history. The goal was simple to state and almost impossible to execute. Rebuild the country's infrastructure from the inside out to survive the earthquake that scientists knew was coming. And the centerpiece of that program was a technology that, when first proposed, sounded more like science fiction than civil engineering. Base isolation. The concept is elegant in its audacity. Instead of building a structure directly on the ground, you separate it. You place the foundation of the building on a series of specially designed bearings, rubber and steel, layered and vulcanized, that can absorb and redirect seismic energy before it enters the building itself. Imagine placing a heavy book on a plate of jelly. When the table shakes, the jelly absorbs the movement. The book barely moves. That's the principle, applied to a 250-meter skyscraper weighing hundreds of thousands of tons.
I'm now standing in the sub-basement of a building in central Tokyo. And this is Vert. This is genuinely something you have to see to believe. Beneath me, between the foundation and the building structure above, there are dozens of these isolators. They look almost disappointingly simple up close. Circular discs, maybe a meter across, layered steel and rubber. But each one of these is carrying thousands of tons, absorbing and dissipating the seismic energy.
The building can drift sideways by a meter, and the structure above won't feel it. The people inside won't fall. The windows won't shatter.
The engineer showing me this said that during the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, which was 9.0 magnitude, one of the strongest ever recorded,
But the base isolators did exactly what they were designed to do. The contents of desks barely shifted.
But hope in earthquake engineering is not a strategy. The Nankai Trough scenario doesn't allow for hope as a primary defense. The projections from Japan's Cabinet Office show that when, not if, the Nankai Trough ruptures at its full potential, it could trigger tsunamis reaching 34 meters in height along certain coastal sections. It could damage or destroy 2.3 million buildings. It could leave 5 million people in need of evacuation. The economic damage could reach 220 trillion yen. That's roughly $1.5 trillion. In a single event, Japan has spent the last 2 decades building what it calls a multi-layered disaster resilience system. Not a single line of defense. Multiple independent layers, designed on the assumption that any one of them could fail. because in a Nankai scale event, some of them will fail. The question is how many and which ones, and whether the ones that survive are enough to hold the country together.
On the Tokai coast, I've been walking along a stretch of seawall that has been extended and reinforced as part of the Nankai Preparedness Program. In some sections, these walls reach 15 meters high. They stand as a testament to the power of nature and our attempts to withstand it. Massive concrete structures running for kilometers along the coastline. And the engineers who built them are honest about their purpose. The wall won't stop a Nankai Trough tsunami. They know that. The wall's job is to slow the first surge, to buy minutes, to give people who didn't get to high ground in time a few more seconds of warning. It's not a solution. It's a component of a solution. And that distinction, Ro, the humility of building something knowing it will be overwhelmed, but building it anyway because every minute.
Behind that philosophy is something that transcends engineering. It's cultural, it's historical, it's the product of a nation that has been shaken and burned and flooded and shattered so many times that resilience isn't aspirational, it's identity. After the 1923 Kanto earthquake, Tokyo rebuilt. After the firebombing of World War II, Tokyo rebuilt. After Kobe, Japan rebuilt. After 2011, the most expensive natural disaster in recorded human history, a 9.0 earthquake that triggered a tsunami that killed 15,000 people and caused 3 nuclear reactors to melt down simultaneously, Japan rebuilt. Every time, faster. Every time, smarter. Every time, with a more sophisticated understanding of what the ground is capable of and what human engineering can do in response.
There's a phrase I keep hearing from engineers and architects and city planners here. Jishin to tomoni ikiru. It means, roughly, to live together with earthquakes. Not to defeat them, not to be defeated by them.
To coexist with a force that cannot be controlled, only understood and prepared for. There's a kind of radical acceptance in it that I find genuinely moving.
These engineers aren't building a perfect defense. They're building a system that fails gracefully.
That bends without breaking. That absorbs shock and returns to function.
And when you spend time in Tokyo town, when you feel the ground tremble under your feet, and watch the buildings sway, and hear the alert tones, and see how calmly and methodically the people here have adapted their lives to this reality, you start to understand that this city might be the most sophisticated act of collective engineering in human history.
The next major earthquake isn't a question of possibility. The seismologists are nearly unanimous. It's a question of when. The Nankai Trough has ruptured roughly every 100 to 150 years throughout recorded history. The last great Nankai sequence occurred in 1944 and 1946. That was 80 years ago. The clock is running, and Japan is doing something remarkable in the face of that reality. It isn't paralyzed by it. It's energized by it. The entire engineering apparatus of one of the most technically sophisticated nations on Earth is aimed with extraordinary focus at the problem of surviving what's coming. Base isolated skyscrapers sway and return. Tuned mass dampers spin inside towers, canceling resonance before it can build. Seismometers beneath railway lines fire signals at the speed of electricity, stopping trains before the waves arrive. Rubber bearings beneath bridges allow the ground to move and the road to follow. AI systems monitor 2,000 sensors across Tokyo, looking for the first signature of a rupture hundreds of kilometers away. Underground chambers the size of Gothic cathedrals stand ready to absorb the floods that follow. Seawalls line the coast, not to win, but to slow. And in 37 million homes, offices, schools, and hospital rooms. People carry in the back of their minds the quiet, constant knowledge that this is a place that shakes.